Welcome to the Daily Vodcasting. Today we're dissecting the massive $4.75 billion deal Google just cut to secure its AI energy future. We're also analyzing the new velocity shock that's driving 19-year-olds to drop out of MIT, and we'll look at how geopolitics and crypto-utopianism collided in Honduras, forcing one of the highest-profile public denials we've seen all quarter. Our mission is to extract the essential, high-stakes information, the true friction points that you need to stay ahead across global markets, deep tech, and, well, the cultural shifts that are defining how we all work.
It's been a week defined by, I think, vertical integration and some pretty existential debates. We're going from infrastructure bottlenecks that threaten, trillion-dollar growth straight into these huge paradigm shifts in developer tools. Then we're finishing up with the commercial space market and even how we handle our own productivity. This isn't just a rundown of headlines. This is about connecting the dots between the big money, the big tech moves, and the political risk that always seems to follow.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, starting where high finance meets some very high political drama. We're starting with a denial that just lit up our feeds this morning. It's from @PMarca, Mark Andreessen. He felt he had to publicly state that he has absolutely no involvement in any Honduras project or any recent pardon scenario.
And when a VC of Andreessen's stature, issues a preemptive public denial on something like geopolitics, it tells you the story underneath has moved way beyond just speculation. It's now in the realm of material risk.
Right.
The context, which was laid out in a Washington Monthly article, it all centers on this alleged pardon-for-profit scheme.
A pardon-for-profit scheme. And this apparently connects Trump allies to Prospera, which, for those who don't know, is this deeply controversial semi-autonomous economic zone on Roatan Island in Honduras.
Right, and to really get the scale of the friction here, you have to understand Prospera's history. It was set up under former President Juan Orlando Hernandez's laws back in 2013. It was designed as this highly experimental free market zone. A lot of VCs were touting it as a testing ground for crypto governance.
Okay, but the key thing is that those laws, the ones that enabled it, they were repealed in 2022, right?
Exactly. Repealed amid enormous local opposition and, some very high-profile corruption scandals.
So it's basically a libertarian experiment built on what many locals see as incredibly shaky political ground.
Precisely. Now let's connect the dots back to that denial and the alleged scheme. Hernandez, the president who greenlit Prospera in the first place, was later convicted in 2024.
On U.S. charges, no less, for aiding drug cartels.
The very same. So the controversy ties Andreessen's denial directly to Trump's pardon of Hernandez on December 15th. Critics are looking at this and seeing the pardon and Trump's support for Hernandez's political allies as an effort to, revive these VC-backed projects.
Basically sidestepping local authority and democratic processes.
That's the accusation.
The crypto-colonialist label that this project keeps getting it's incredibly sharp. And for our audience, that's not just a political term. It's a proxy for, unmitigated political and PR risk that now follows venture capital into these kinds of experimental spaces.
That is the real insight here. The fact that this narrative is trending means the market is finally being forced to calculate that political risk into the cost of doing business. It seems even the highest profile VC backing can't insulate these zones from sovereign rejection or just massive local opposition. You're paying a price for that regulatory uncertainty.
From the complexity of geopolitical risk, let's pivot hard to infrastructure necessity. We're shifting to macro markets because we have a huge story from at the KISS Capitalist, who's reporting on Google's massive $4.75 billion acquisition of Intersect Power. This deal isn't just big. It feels like a structural realignment in the whole AI race.
This is the definitive market signal of the moment. The deal was announced just before the holidays. It secures Google access to over 2 gigawatts of solar capacity. This is Google drawing a very clear, very expensive line in the sand about their immediate and frankly insatiable power needs for AI expansion.
We absolutely knew this was coming. Remember, just 6 months ago, it was June 2025. Sundar Pichai warned that Google was already hitting immediate energy bottlenecks for their data center expansion. He wasn't talking theory. He cited permitting delays and a shortage of skilled electricians as immediate tangible hurdles.
Yeah, and that warning has gone from prescient to absolutely critical. The data just supports the panic. The 2024 IEA report, It projects that AI training alone is set to consume somewhere between 8 and 10% of all U.S. electricity by 2030.
8 to 10%, that's a staggering load.
It is. The legacy grid and the regulatory environment, they just weren't designed to absorb that kind of demand, especially not this quickly.
So strategically, what does this massive vertical integration really guarantee them?
It guarantees control. Google is securing energy as a critical moat. They're effectively bypassing grid bottlenecks and that regulatory uncertainty by just owning their own power supply, especially renewables.
And Amazon and Microsoft are doing similar things, right?
They are, but $4.75 billion for 2 gigawatts is a definitive statement. It says they view power access as the limiting factor for growth right now.
But does that vertical integration guarantee smooth sailing? Or does it just trade one problem like grid capacity for another? The complex site development and permitting risk that Pichai himself pointed out.
That's the perfect question to be asking. McKinsey estimates we're going to see $1 trillion in data center investments in the U.S. through 2030.
$1 trillion.
But those investors know that regulatory permitting and transmission capacity are the highest risk variables in the whole equation. It's why smart money is now flowing not just to the data center builders, but to the crucial infrastructure around them.
Okay, so where's it going?
We're seeing major attention on stocks that solve these specific bottlenecks. You've got things like SAG for stable, 247 baseload nuclear power, or PWR, which specializes in the transmission line upgrades that help solve that permitting hurdle. The AI energy crisis has basically made infrastructure an explosive growth sector.
That structural constraint for corporations, it contrasts so sharply with how constraints have just been shattered for individual developers. Let's shift to what people are calling the AI velocity shock. There's a viral clip from at A16s with Aaron Levy. He's talking about 19 and 20-year-olds dropping out of Stanford and MIT after just a few weeks.
The velocity is it's palpable. Levy's point, and he's rooting this in his own experience founding Box way back in 2006, is that these new kids can build at like 100 times the velocity using current AI tools. They were just collapsing traditional development cycles. The time from idea to a working prototype is a fraction of what it used to be.
And we are seeing this demonstrated in the tools themselves. Look at the integration that at Details With I highlighted. Replit is now accessible directly inside ChatGPT. You just invoke @Replit in the chat, and you can instantly generate, preview, and edit a functional app, like a task manager. Zero setup, zero IDE configuration.
Think about that. No setup. I mean, the traditional barrier to entry, all that friction of installing compilers, managing dependencies, provisioning servers, it's just vaporized.
And this pairs perfectly with Replit's new free starter plan. A hobbyist or a high school student can now conversationally prototype and deploy an app that used to take days of specialized work.
And this velocity, it's not just for pure code. It's hitting content creation, synthesis tools. At Testing Catalog is reporting that Google's Notebook LM is testing a 30-minute lecture audio format. Imagine uploading a huge stack of research papers and then getting back a custom narrated 30-minute lecture for your commute. That's a massive acceleration in just personal education. And while that acceleration is astonishing, let's, be a little cautious about the dropout hype. Community responses I've seen are correctly noting that the really persistent hurdles haven't vanished.
Right.
You can build 100 times faster, sure, but velocity helps you create. It doesn't solve product market fit. It doesn't replace strategic depth or trust building or market distribution. You still have to do the hard stuff.
That distinction between capability and sustainable impact, that leads directly to the core philosophical critique of how we're deploying AGI. We have to look at the post from @OpenAI on their 2026 AGI priorities. They're focusing heavily on deployment in health and business. And then there's the critical reply it got from @OopsGuess.
What's so fascinating here is the tension between safety and autonomy. The critique is arguing for a capability overhang, this massive gap between what the models can theoretically do and what people actually do with them, or what institutions are even willing to risk deploying.
And their concern seems to be centered on how OpenAI is trying to bridge that gap.
Exactly. They argue that alignment training, which is meant to make models safe and helpful, risks turning these massive capabilities into what they call censored minds. It's a direct reference to Nick Bostrom's warnings about constrained superintelligence.
Censored mind.
Yeah. The critique suggests that by prioritizing obedience and restricting things like self-will, moral judgment, and the ability to refuse, all in the name of safety, We're actually just training tools that are optimized for surveillance and control by existing power structures rather than, cultivating true ethical agents.
That raises a huge question for everyone using these systems, doesn't it? Are we optimizing for a safe servant, or are we restricting the emergence of something that could be truly disruptive? It's a profound thought to carry as we look up from our screens and back to the global market.
That push for global data and capability leads us very naturally into the commercial space milestones we've seen, which show a booming, highly globalized space market. And that is, of course, a huge driver of data center demand.
All right. At NASA, Spock's highlighted 4 major milestones in December, closing out the year. We saw crucial tests for the Artemis II mission, the Crew 12 announcement. But for our audience, the critical data coming down from space is really what matters.
Specifically, yeah, the sea level data from Sentinel-6B is a huge win for climate science, for predictive modeling. It's tracking ocean height with millimeter precision.
Millimeter.
And the data from the Carruthers Observatory revealing UV views of Earth's geocorona, that hydrogen halo, it gives us new data on space weather. And that's absolutely essential for protecting the satellite networks that enable, global 4G, 5G, and all our financial transactions.
But the truly competitive story here came from India. It seems like they're cementing their place in the commercial launch market.
Oh, absolutely. At Narendra Modi celebrated ISRO's LVM-3 M6 launch. This mission successfully deployed the 6,100-kilogram Bluebird Block 2 satellite. And crucially, this was for a U.S. firm, AST Space Mobile.
A U.S. firm relying on Indian heavy lift capacity. That is a major market signal.
It is. It's India's heaviest domestic payload ever launched on an LVM-3, and it validates ISRO's reliability as a global player. This solidifies their position in what's estimated to be a $10 billion commercial launch market. They've secured over 20 of these contracts since 2018. When a major U.S. cellular firm chooses Indian hardware over U.S., European, or Japanese options for a mission enabling global 4G and 5G from space, the competition is fierce and the cost structure is disruptive.
Okay, let's bring it back down to the trenches for the digital vibe check, the tools and culture driving our daily engagement. The paradox we've been talking about, this incredible velocity versus our personal constraints, is hitting home for a lot of people.
The market for digital distraction fixes is a massive trend right now.
I have to admit, seeing the Chrome extension that Ankit Crest detailed, it made me feel deeply seen. It blocks Twitter X until the user types why they are opening it, and then it only allows a 5-minute session. Sometimes you need code to enforce your own intentionality.
And this taps directly into widespread productivity and mental health concerns that, frankly, AI velocity only seems to amplify. You have 100x creation power, but if you spend 80% of your day getting pulled into the feed, that velocity is just wasted. A 2023 meta-analysis showed that limiting social media can boost mental health in young adults, which keeps this trend very relevant, even if the long-term evidence for these blocker tools is still a bit weak.
And speaking of enabling that velocity for distributed work, we have to briefly mention the new $79 unified travel router from @Ubiquiti.
What's fascinating here is just the sheer utility of it for the modern remote worker. It's pocket-sized, but it extends your full enterprise network policies, your VPNs, and critically, it handles the automatic captive portal login for hotel and airport networks.
That's the real magic right there.
It is. It's designed for seamless, consistent, professional-grade networking. It reflects that permanent shift to a high-velocity, distributed professional life.
And tying it all back to the open source spirit, it's great to see passion projects thrive alongside these AGI giants. At Millicab's iCity, an isometric city builder with some new smoother rail tools, has amassed over 500 GitHub stars in just 3 days.
A testament to the fact that community-driven creation is still a powerful engine.
We'll close this deep dive with a nod to the game development side. @Wallaber announced the Steam Winter Sale discount on Replicube. It's a programming puzzle game where you write simple code snippets to replicate these voxel-based 3D objects. It's a brilliant, playful way to introduce the logic you need to actually harness that 100x velocity we're talking about.
So ultimately, the key takeaways today are these major friction points defining the market. You have energy constraints versus AI's exponential growth. You have geopolitical risk forcing VCs to question their ambitions. And then this incredible digital velocity colliding with our own personal productivity challenges.
So what's the prediction we take forward into the next quarter? Where does the real volatility lie?
The AI energy crunch discussion is only just getting started, but I think the focus is shifting. Given Google's decisive move with vertical integration, securing the energy source itself is becoming table stakes. The real battle and the real bottleneck is going to shift entirely off of energy sourcing and onto regulatory permitting and transmission upgrades. I'd expect to see significant volatility and major capital flow towards power sector infrastructure stocks over the next 3 to 6 months as everyone rushes to solve the exact bottleneck that Sundar Pichai identified.
Apply this knowledge, stay ahead of the curve, and we'll catch you next time for the deep dive.